Hey, my name is Xiomara Balentina, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me into this space, and I look forward to a very great exchange. The topic of my talk today is entitled Disrupting Academia Through the Reclaiming of Ethnic Worldviews. As I reflect on this subject matter, I must state that I stand on the shoulders of those who have walked the path towards a higher level of consciousness. And so, I begin with the guiding words of Naeem Akbar, clinical psychologist and author. Each generation has the responsibility of maintaining the level of consciousness attained by the previous generations, and of advancing the community to even higher levels by the development of their own consciousness. Here, Naeem Akbar speaks to the importance of each generation learning who and what they are. According to him, this is achieved through the vehicle called education. In his book, Know Thyself, Naeem Akbar states that education has some important functions. He says that education is a process through which a proper identity is facilitated. Education actually should bring forth that which is already within us. The transmission of the legacy of competence is another important function of education. So before a station child is taught who the Dutch politician Wim Kok was, they must first be taught who the station politician Vincent Lopes was. Another function of education is the development of a vision that is shared by all. For example, what level of self-determination do we as a community desire? So bearing in mind what Naeem Akbar has said, I started to reflect on my formal education journey. I actually attended a primary school run by Dutch European nuns who was certainly not afraid to correct us if we broke the rules. The language of instruction at the school was Dutch, and all of our textbooks were written by Dutch European authors who used Dutch lived experiences to clarify concepts. Of course, my secondary education experience was not that much different. Interestingly enough, my primary and secondary school experiences were exact replicas of the university experience I had in the Netherlands, despite the difference in geographical space. So I then asked myself the question, did the education I received fulfill its function? Actually, my schooling has been steeped in what I called Dutch Europeanness. For example, successive generations of station children were taught to sing the song Wij zijn de jongens en wij zijn de meisjes van Statia when special visitors came to the island. I can vividly remember singing this song and waving the Dutch flag during an official visit of the Queen. A logical question then to ask is, how did the station child get to this point? The answer lies in the occurrence of atrocious events such as, but not limited to, the African Holocaust, followed by colonization, and then neocolonialism, where dependencies are directly or indirectly controlled by independent countries. This has all led to the erosion of various ethnic worldviews, and as a result, Eurocentrism has emerged as the dominant worldview. I must state here that this so-called Dutch Europeanness that I talk about concerns a whole group of people. And of course, we can replace the term Dutch Europeanness with Westernization or even Eurocentrism. Edwin Nichols is an industrial psychologist who developed the theory the philosophical aspect of cultural difference. He states that most cultures have a philosophical basis from which they work, which is explained through axiology, which focuses on values that cultures promote, epistemology, which asks the question, how do we know things? And logic, which focuses on how we reason towards an answer. He traced these worldviews back to the origins of these groups, and he also looked at what various groups needed to do in order to survive migration during the last ice age. Here, the worldview of three categories of ethnic groups are compared. The first category is that of the Europeans and the European Americans. To them, the highest value lies in the object, the external, which is a thing we can count and measure. Parts are assembled in a very sequential way. For Africans, African Americans, Caribbean people of African ancestry, and Latinx, the highest value lies in the relationship. We know things via symbolic imagery and rhythm. Just think about proverbs, local sayings, the oral tradition, and intuition. For Asians and Polynesians, the highest value lies in the cohesion of the group. They know what they know via transcendental striving. Their reasoning is cyclic and repetitive. It is important to stress here that we have all gone through socialization, where we have taken over values and other ways of knowing from different ethnic groups. But according to Edwin Nichols, there is still an essence to who we are as groups. So I have said that atrocious acts have led to the centering of the Eurocentric worldview, which has penetrated all spaces, including academia. Think about psychology, archaeology, and heritage studies. And a very concrete example of the workings of the Eurocentric worldview is when ancestral remains were excavated in St. Eustatius and were kept secret from the descendant community. If we compare the positioning of the researchers involved in that project with that of the petition organizers protesting the excavations and the manner in which this was done while using Edwin Nichols' theory, we can discover some very interesting things. For the researchers, the ancestral remains were viewed as objects to be counted and measured based on a predetermined framework. The researchers seem to be interested only in the research findings, the object, which they could later present at their conferences. There appeared to be no interest in local knowledge or local ideas, perhaps because in their mind, Western scientific knowledge is the only knowledge that counts. But for us, the petition organizers, we view the remains with the uttermost respect because we are part of them. And because we are part of them, we must have a say in what happens to them. I must add here that at the start of the protests, we were also very concerned about the lack of transparency, and we instinctively knew that something wasn't right. This based on past experiences with researchers who came to the island, and all they did was take. So having heard all of this, I hope that there are persons in this digital space who, like me, believe that academia needs to be disrupted. The decentering of Eurocentrism or Westernization is necessary, as the Western Academy has spread to all parts of the globe, including St. Martin, Saba, St. Eustatius, Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire. To disrupt requires us to decolonize. This process starts in the mind, and perhaps you can think about what this process of decolonizations mean to you or for you. But it was Marcus Garvey who said, "We are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, for though others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind." And once we have started the process in our minds, we start to seek out who and what we are. We talk with elders, we observe, we examine what values generations before us held dear, and what our ways of knowing have been, and how these ways of knowing have stood the test of time. Once we start that process in our minds, we give ourselves permission to define ourselves in our own terms. There is actually a powerful saying that says, "We are the ones we have been waiting for." The acceptance of our values and our ways of knowing actually starts with us. We cannot demand of others that they respect or accept our worldview if we don't start with ourselves. Linda Smith, Maori scholar, in talking about her own indigenous community, says, "We have our own concepts of research." I will repeat, we have our own concepts of research. We need to show our people that our worldview has agency. We have a philosophy of being. So once there is acceptance in our mind about our worldview, we see this reflected in our work or in our respective disciplines. We then intentionally engage in axiological, epistemological, and logic disobedience. And to give you an example, colleagues and I were asked to give a presentation on the strengthening of mental well-being before and after a storm. We, however, made a case for a presentation on the strengthening of holistic well-being instead. You see, thinking holistically is part of the essence of who we are as Caribbean people. Researchers attempting to conduct research in local communities should consider the following. Perhaps communities do not desire to collaborate with you because your research practices do not align with their value system and their ways of knowing. Or perhaps they want to do things independent of you because they are standing in their own power. Perhaps you need to agree to support self-determined research conducted by the local community. And very importantly, you should also consider that being a Caribbean researcher does not exclude you from Eurocentrism or Dutch Europeanness. I know that in my work, I have to be very intentional in what I say, I do, how I say things, and how I do things. To be quite honest, we should ask ourselves if we can truly decolonize academia. For to decolonize means that there must be a willingness from persons with the power, the object, to give up control, the object. There must be a willingness to break with Western hegemony in order to develop genuine respect for all ethnic worldviews. Or perhaps we need to collectively reimagine what the academy can look like for us. So here are some of my parting questions for you. How aware are you of your Dutch Europeanness? Whose question are you researching? Is it the government's question? Or was the question designed by the academy? Is the research question a true reflection of collaboration with the local community? Where does your knowledge or motivation to do research come from? Do you see yourself as a savior? Do you want to help? Do you want to impress? Is it a status thing? A psychology mentor said to me once, "Xiomara, be mindful of trying to save your clients, because before you know it, you become the perpetrator of their distress." Also, whose axiology, epistemology, and logic do you hold sacred, and why? Who truly benefits from your research? In the words of Linda Smith, does your research improve the conditions and the sovereignty of the people you are researching? Does your research lift the people up? Are the institutions you work for ready to embrace all worldviews in an equal and fair way? It is said that we cannot force someone to hear a message they are not yet ready to receive, but we must never underestimate the power of planting a seed. So I hope that I have been able to plant a seed in the minds of some of you. I thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing your reflections.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but to ourselves can free our mind. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got